Hey there everyone, ni hao, this is Chiquito and today I'm gonna compare Shanghai with Buenos Aires. 我们开始吧。Okay, much better this way. So to compare the cities properly, I have selected 8 categories. We're going to assign scores for each category on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, so let's start off with cuisine. And oh man, this is a tough one. Buenos Aires has definitely amazing cuisine. They have a lot of local cuisine such as empanadas. Their meat is just so delicious. And because of the Italian influence, they have a lot of pasta. The pizza is also really good. And well, of course, Argentinian wine is also a very good pairing for all this food. On the other hand, Shanghai has a lot of Chinese cuisine, of course, from all over China, as well as all around Asia. You have excellent Japanese cuisine, Korean cuisine, Southeast Asian cuisine. At the same time, you have a lot of South American restaurants as well. You can also find Argentinian meat and of course North American, European cuisine as well. The pizza in Shanghai is actually very similar to the Italian one. So yeah, even though Argentina has really good cuisine, especially with their sweets such as dulce de leche or alfajor, I believe that because Shanghai has more diversity, it just has to win this category by a little bit. Shanghai would be getting 9 points out of 10 and Buenos Aires would be getting an 8. Okay, moving on to the second category, that would be transportation. In this category, Shanghai definitely excels. Not only do you have arguably the best metro system in the whole world, then you also have taxis everywhere. The taxis relatively cheap as well. Also, you have the electric scooters option. And of course, as the last and main option, you have the shared bikes, which are probably the best invention out there. You can literally find them in every single sidewalk. As for Buenos Aires, well, their subway is also pretty cheap. And I would say the main disadvantage is that it mostly crosses the northern part of the city, which would be the city center. It doesn't get as far as Shanghai's. In regards of cycling, Buenos Aires is an amazing city. You can cycle basically in any street that you want. The streets are really clean, very nice, very wide and easy to cycle around. Taxis are also quite cheap in Buenos Aires. There is a lot of bus options as well throughout the city, but sometimes you get to wait for a long time for the next bus, so you need to know their timings. And you also have the Metrobus option, which crosses the main street, 9 de Julio. They have a lane that is designated just for this kind of bus. So Buenos Aires is definitely a nice city for transportation, but I have to give this point to Shanghai. I believe there's very few cities that can compete with Shanghai in this category. So this is definitely a 10 for Shanghai and 8 for Buenos Aires. Alright, so our third category is society. Let's start with Buenos Aires. So Buenos Aires has quite friendly people, quite expressive because of the Italian influence, way more passionate in the way they communicate with people. At the same time, they are very, very open-minded. They love traveling, meeting people. They are very forward-thinking. When you're walking around the city, you feel like everybody has a strong personality, kind of like based on the way they dress, based on the way they look. And how passionate they are about things is just inspiring. I love that. And because it's such a big city in South America, you will also find a lot of other Latinos out there. So definitely feels like an international city. It's quite charming. People are very charming. On the other hand, people in Shanghai come from all over China. So it's also very international. Also, you have a lot of internationals, lots of people from Japan, from Korea, and also like from Europe, from South America. There's a lot of mix. And as I explained in many videos before, people in Shanghai are also very welcoming, making you feel like part of the city, treating you well. It's very easy to make friends, very easy to communicate with people. But there's something that waves me towards Argentina more in terms of society, and that would be that people in Shanghai worry way too much about money and work. They think too much about this. They put way too much priority to these things. That's definitely something that I don't like too much about Shanghai. So I have to give this category to Buenos Aires. So it would be 9 points for Buenos Aires and 8 points to Shanghai. Moving on to the next category, that would be architecture. This is such a difficult point to compare because both cities are very beautiful and they are just so different. So I can tell I was extremely shocked when I arrived in Buenos Aires because I think it has this European vibe. There's so much colonial architecture in different styles. And there's a lot of diversity as well. You can go to El Barrio de la Boca. You'll see these picturesque houses with the colors of the Boca Junior team. Then you also have Palermo, which is a fancy neighborhood, and you see all these modern buildings and gorgeous houses all around. And you also have a modern cityscape. The city is pretty diverse. Now, comparing Shanghai with it, it's just so difficult because Shanghai is just extremely gorgeous anywhere you go. Every neighborhood is so distinct. The difference is so well marked. You get to see the colonial architecture, but you also have Yuyuan, which has traditional Chinese architecture. There is also a neighborhood that is a mix of a little bit of everything, which would be Jinan. And you have the modernity, right? You have the skyscrapers, vibrant colors, and the neon lights everywhere. You even have this huge European-like neighborhood in the middle of the city. Of course, both cities are so different. There's so much contrast. I think Shanghai beats Buenos Aires here, mostly because it's more diverse than Buenos Aires. It gets a 10 and Buenos Aires gets a 9. Okay, our next category would be parks and outdoor spaces. Honestly, I can hardly imagine any city that has more beautiful parks, bigger parks, wider parks. The amount of gigantic trees that are around Buenos Aires, I mean, these trees are hundreds of years for sure. Every couple of blocks you would find a beautiful park in the middle of that neighborhood. You have a lot of people lying on the grass. That's the best part. There's no fences, there's no tickets, there's no entrance. You can just access any park any time of the day you want. The beautiful parks in Palermo, they're just huge. It's like the whole neighborhood is connected throughout these parks with their own lake, and you see how people are using these parks and enjoying them, how much these parks are part of the city. It's a great example of how to build a city around its nature. As for Shanghai, it is great in terms of parks. There's so much more greenery than you would expect in such a concrete city, right? The parks are very beautiful as well. There's a lot of diversity in them in every neighborhood, you know, like there's so many little parks where you can walk your dog or jog around. Also, the whole riverside is basically a park, you know, but I would say there's some limitations that you find on them. Most of the time you cannot sit on the grass. You have to pay for a ticket to entry most of these parks. Some of these parks close up very early, and there's no contest here. Buenos Aires is just years ahead in terms of these outdoor spaces. So hands down, it's a 10 for Buenos Aires, and it would be an 8 for Shanghai. Okay, the next category is safety. And both cities actually feel pretty safe, I have to say. The main difference would be that Shanghai feels safe in every single part of the city. There's no such thing as a dangerous neighborhood. Whereas in Buenos Aires, you feel pretty safe in the city center. There's a lot of police officers. There's a lot of CCTV and cameras, but there's also the villas that you have around the city. They are way more criminal. There's a lot of drugs in them, more poverty, less education, and definitely these places are way more dangerous. Safety is based on neighborhoods, basically in Buenos Aires, whereas in Shanghai, you feel safe everywhere all the time. Yep, so in this category, Shanghai just crushes it. It would get 10 points out of 10, whereas Buenos Aires gets a 7. Next category is arts and entertainment. So let's start with Shanghai here. Art in Shanghai is much better than you would expect. There's a lot of very underground art galleries and underground streets with very artsy people. There's a whole neighborhood that is dedicated to art, which would be the West Band. There's so many art galleries here, creative spaces, and even cultural institutions. But art in Buenos Aires is on a different level completely. The amount of shows of all kinds, from tango to operas, to plays, movies, etc. And you can just see they are everywhere. It felt like we are in Broadway. You know, Buenos Aires has more than 300 theaters, whereas Shanghai has around 55 or something. So that tells you the city breathes art everywhere, in every single corner. The music scene is also fantastic in Buenos Aires. You can see tango being played on the streets. You can go to a tango show. There's so many bars with live music. There's a lot of musicians on the street as well. It feels like the whole city is breathing in art. So Buenos Aires definitely gets a 10, well deserved, whereas Shanghai would get a 7. And we have arrived to the last point of the day, which would be the cost of living. Both cities definitely have expensive and cheap things. The main difference would be in terms of the salaries that you can earn. So in Buenos Aires, the salaries right now, because of the economy, falling apart, are not that good. Argentina overall as a country is the only place in the whole world which passed from being a first world country to a third world country because of their economy. So even though there's a lot of cheap things in Buenos Aires, such as rent and food, because the salaries do not compensate for these prices, I would say it's still the most expensive city to live in. On the other hand, what makes Shanghai special is that for a big city, it has a wide spectrum of prices, so many cheap options in terms of food. Rent wise, I would say rent is the only thing that would not change much in price. Everything else, you have a choice. You have the cheap things and the expensive things. Both of them will be of great quality. As I stated before, the main difference is that in Shanghai, the average salary is much higher than in Buenos Aires. Even though Shanghai overall is pricier, it ends up being the cheaper city to live in. So here Shanghai definitely takes it. I would give Shanghai a 9 out of 10. In Buenos Aires, unfortunately, it's a 6 out of 10. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments below what do you think. If you liked it, please leave it a like. And I'll see you on the next one. The way. Chimichurri, Argentinian real proper chimichurri.